Anybody? Anyone? Like you could also text on the chat window. It's open, I suppose.
Please be able
please
to respond, because if we don't know about your expectations, then there is no use of conducting this session.
Exactly.
We need answers from your side, guys, because we are hoping to make a difference in your Campus Beats program.
So we want to know like how to start and approach the problem, like the starting mindset, what we should have.
Okay, so who is this?
Sir Rishabh.
Okay.
Krish name is
Krish.
So yeah.
Could you please repeat your question?
So how to approach and start a question, like what mindset we should have?
Which question?
To
We are
begin
talking
with.
about which question? We are talking about a particular case study question.
No, sir. So in general, all the case study questions, what type of questions they gave us?
Okay, so do you have any idea regarding the types of questions and the types of case studies that have been asked in the previous years?
Yes, sir. I have solved some previous year case studies. I've seen the questions.
Okay, so what has been your feedback regarding that? Are you able to solve the questions, or you are facing some difficulty?
So most of the questions were solvable, but in starting in beginning, we are like a bit confused with how we should take the idea, like how we should start it. हम लोग को काफी टाइम लग जाता है कि वो डिसाइड करने में कि इन डेटा को कैसे मैनेज करें और फिर उसको आगे क्वेश्चंस में कहाँ इम्प्लीमेंट करें. मतलब क्वेश्चंस एग्जैक्टली पूछना क्या चाहते हैं हमसे, वो कई बार मिस हो जाता है.
Okay, we'll definitely be answering that. And looking at the chat box, Ritwij is also asking about the same, how to approach the case. So just ping here in the chat box that anyone else who wants to ask this particular question regarding how to start a particular question in case study, so that we can know that majority of the audience wants to know this answer.
Like even if it's a minority, we would obviously discuss it, but yeah, we want to know your opinion.
Yeah.
Guys, you can like any question, right? And we can judge by the number of likes.
Because we'll be going by the majority, because we have a limited time here.
Okay, so like Shashwat, I think we should start now.
Sure.
Okay, so the first question I take this only, and I'll approach this in this way only. So yeah, so hi, I'm Shashwat, and I'm the second runner-up of the ZS Campus Beats last year. And so I'll be going through how to basically solve a case study. My friends will also, Shashwat, Hardik, Amber, and Arpita will assist me. And obviously, how to go about solving a question from start, like how to interpret the data and all those things. So, like, is my screen visible, first of all, to everybody?
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay, great. Okay, so first of all, like when you get the case, generally I'll be talking about the process in general throughout the case explanation as well. So as the case challenge starts, you'll get the case at around 12 o'clock sharp. You'll get your team leader will get the mail, and you can start solving it at that instant of time only. So the case generally consists of three parts. The case study of ZS consists of three parts: the business consulting, the business operations, and the business technology part. And as the name is self-explanatory, the business consulting is about basic questions on how you would be altering your market area, how you would be allocating your budget, etc., etc. The operations part would be concerned more with the operations of the company in general. It would be about your employees, how would you rate them, etc., etc. And the technology part would generally employ SQL, or if you don't know SQL, you could also take help of a data warehouse diagram, so that you'd be able to solve it through that as well. So those would be the three parts. And okay, so how to approach a case study? So first of all, the most important part of solving the case study is read the case in general. What the company is expecting from you, you have to be true to that, so that you'll be able to answer in future about that. For example, if the company is wanting you to maximize their profits, so you'd have to answer in all those particular sections according to how the company is maximizing their profit. If the company is wanting to increase their team size, so you have to go through that how the company is going to increase the team size, or how the company is going to enter a new market in general. you have to read the case firstly, and that's really important because generally what happens, like it would be the background, as I like the slide shows as well. You'll get a background, and you will be able to read that background and think what the case study is demanding. Generally, people overlook it and go directly solving onto the mathematics questions because they feel that it would be good. But I think that's the major important part, because this will acquaint you through how what the company is demanding in general. So don't skip it over by anyhow. I'd say read it 2 or 3 or 4 times, read it with your team, discuss with your team as well that what the company is demanding, and this would eventually help you ease out the other questions as well. Okay, so moving on, after the background, obviously the first would be the business consulting part. So what happens generally, what the question is about, the question would be generally about you would be given some particular percentage of for example, if I take there is a promotional channel, so how TV, social media and all those, how in how many percentage that is distributed, the budget is distributed, and how much is the revenue there. And if the company is asking you to maximize their revenue likewise, so how would you approach it? This would be my example. So in general, I'd suggest go about firstly see on what percentage, what revenue the basic social media or the TV is offering. For example, if TV offers on 10,000 budget, it offers a 20,000 revenue. On 20,000, it offers a 30,000, and likewise. The second part, social media, is also the same. All these things are given to you, and there is this optimum budget which you need to allot. And right now I'm talking about the maximum revenue. It can be profit as well. Then you have to talk about the profit. Then you have to minus the things. So make a clear understanding about what it is demanding from you. The question is demanding from you. Make a flow chart. How would you be generally approaching that question in the future as well? Because what happens is you might be assuming something, you might be going on a particular path, and you are near the solution, but you realize that the question isn't demanding this. So if you have a flow chart in general, you will be able to come back and start again from there where you have the like what should I say, have done wrong, like what your mistake was generally. The flow chart will help you in that. Okay, so
basically what Shashwat is trying to refer here is that for answering these type of business operation questions, one should have a great and strong hold in the data interpretation module of the aptitude, because the more you practice data interpretation, you will know how to correlate the different types of data interpretation tools. Like as you can see here, we have got a flow chart, we have got a table, we have got a pie chart. There are multiple types of data interpretation tools, and the questions won't be exclusive to only one of them. They would mostly relate all these together, and you'll have to get a hold of let's say that you get a data from the pie chart, you'll have to interpret that data in the bar chart also. So these questions will test your skills in the data interpretation module to the fullest. So I would suggest that you need to practice a lot of questions regarding data interpretation to answer these questions. Moving on, is there any doubt in this section? Because I feel that this was the major point, that you need to focus on data interpretation and how to relate different types of data to each other, because there will be 2 to 3 questions in each section, and all those would relate to each other. So please make sure about that.
You might have to get the data from the previous question into the next question as well, and then solve upon it. So,
and the questions might seem easy at first look, because I remember from my experience also, the questions seemed easy at the earlier part of solving, but as you get forward into that question, you get the whole that there are a lot of calculations in that question, and also the to get an accurate answer is as important as getting it to the right answer. So let's focus on the next section now.
There's one more thing I would like to add here. You will see a lot of graphs and pie charts and a lot of data, and usually each one of that data will be used in the question. There won't be a case where the data is just given and you can that it won't be used in any of the question. All the data that has been given to you will be used somehow. So just don't skip on something. And if you feel like that I'm not using this particular bar graph or particular pie chart, then maybe you are wrong on your concepts. Okay, because this sometimes happen that okay, I didn't use this particular bar graph, still I'm getting an answer. So there's a high possibility that your answer might be wrong, or it might not be the best approach. For a particular question, there can be a couple of approaches and they might give you the same answer. So I would really strongly suggest that going through the question once, maybe for half an hour or 45 minutes is not a big problem. Just go through the question and try to understand what it's asking for. Write it down somewhere and try to work around from like the ending to the beginning. Like you will get the answer, like I want to find this, how can I just get to this point, how can I use these bar graphs and pie charts.
The most important aspect of business operation questions is that most of the teams would get to an answer, but the accurate answer would be the most difficult to find. Many would get the answer, but the answer might seem to be the correct one, but it ends up being wrong. So please make sure that you get it checked again and again before finally submitting it.
Right. And it
Also,
might be.
I would like to point out, like if you have a feeling that some data is missing, you're probably wrong, because literally every single data is given. I remember I had this feeling that some of the data is maybe missing, but maybe check your approach again, because you're wrong and every data is actually given here only.
Any doubts on this particular section? We are free to answer it. Or else we'll be moving on to the next section.
I think, in the chat, there was this question number. If you could just tell this.
I have 2 points to add from here. First of all, that when you guys get the PPT, you will get the PPT at 12 a.m. And the first mistake you could do is that you all 5 of you would approach the question continuously, like in a current meeting. What I would suggest is don't do that. Instead, start approaching the PPT as 5 different individuals without talking to each other. Because the main motto is approach. And if, let's say, we 5 of us are in a team and Shashwat just gave his approach, then I wouldn't be able to come up with my own approach. And even if I were to do, it would be influenced by Shashwat and it won't be original. So what you guys need to do when you get the PPT at 12 a.m. is distribute it to 5 different people, get 5 different approaches from you guys, and then discuss it, which approach you guys think would be better. This is one part. The second part, which Durgesh has asked, is could you please elaborate on how practice data interpretation problem? Durgesh, for that, before you get into the case study, because case study is actually a big, huge data interpretation question, and to get on that question in the first time would be a pretty much hardest. So you can just Google about logical reasoning and DILR, which we say the data interpretation question. And on Google, you would find many of the stuff. It would be based on graphs, if you could go for, and games and tournaments. These are some kind of data interpretation questions which would help you really engage in the case study later on. Because at this level, if your first data interpretation question would be ZS case study, it would be pretty much hard. So to practice, you can just Google on questions and you would find some basic questions to work on them.
Just adding on to that, the best tool for getting the data interpretation problems because is the ZS case study. I would tell this because the level of the data interpretation questions asked here is really high. And as Amber said, that it is really difficult to find it anywhere else around. So first of all, get a knack about what is the level of the question and try and solve the previous 5-year problems. So you will get an understanding of the level at which the questions are asked. And then you can browse for other sources. You can take a look at IndiaBix, Prep Insta. These are some useful sites. But first of all, your priority should be answering the previous year questions.
Right. Okay. Anything else to add?
I think we can move on.
Okay. Okay, so moving on to the other questions. So generally there are 2 kind of questions in the case study. One whose answer would be absolute, like who would have only one correct answer, and that answer wouldn't be like that there won't be more like much difference between the answers, and the other would be an answer which depends upon how you are justifying your answer. For example, the question you are seeing on the screen right now, basically it asks us to assess what time we will basically play a particular TV cartoon or a TV movie in general. So there isn't a right or wrong answer to it. It depends upon how you are justifying your answer. In the case study, it's really important to justify your answers because when a person reads your case study, he doesn't have an answer in mind. And when you are justifying that point, like if I'm reading it, I'll find it, yeah, this person is correct and this point is valid. So these are the particular two types of questions. So you don't have to worry about that if a particular person in your team or a particular person in the other team is getting a different answer and you are getting a different answer. It might be that that question is not particularly having a correct answer. It might be based upon, as I said, the justification which you give to that particular answer. So yeah, these will be type of questions as well. Moving on to the second part of the case study. So the second part is the business operations part. So what it will generally have, it will also have a background. So obviously it's really important to read about the background, as I said earlier as well. It would have a lot of data. For example, in our data last year, it was close to 4,000 or 5,000 rows in Excel, and it would like require you to build upon that data. So here, what I would suggest you is, first of all, try to form a data which is of a lesser number of rows. Like if you are having 4,000 rows in the data, don't go directly solving on that 4,000 rows. Form a lesser sample space. For example, take about 40 rows in random for that from that particular data. Solve upon that, and then realize that how would you be basically scaling it up to the 4,000 row data. That would be really easy for you because then you will be getting an approach in a smaller sample space, and you will be able to know that how am I going to scale up to the 4,000 row, the largest sample space data as well. So like this was my approach. If others could please elaborate on.
Yeah, actually, there's a lot of data. The first approach should be to sort that data. Like try to
Right.
make a meaning out of that data and not just start solving the question. Like first sort your data and understand what the data is given before starting to solve the question.
And more or less, if you get through this part of sorting the data, your task would be made many times easier, because
Right.
then you will be able to understand the question in a different perspective. Because if you don't sort the data and straight away head on to the question, you will be so confused that you won't be able to get any lead. So yes, first of all, just get a good look at the data and sort it. Then you will be able to get the answers pretty easily. So this is a really challenging section for those who don't have any idea about how to manage a large amount of data. So please work on your data skills in Excel and try and relate that data to the question asked.
Adding to what
One-
Shashwat said as well. Yeah, Amber, please.
Shashwat, go ahead.
Okay. So just one point, adding to what Shashwat said, like there was this question as well, what tools are good to tackle? So generally what will happen, you will find various tools on the internet to solve this particular operations part. But as Shashwat said, we only need Excel and good data skills to solve it. We don't need any other tool particularly. Like I haven't seen much of the teams using it. Like there are tools, there are Microsoft Power BI, MongoDB, Power BI, etc. But you don't need any particular tool to solve it. Just solve it with basic Excel. It will be easier for you, as well as you will be able to interpret it in a good way, and you'll be able to present it as well in a good way with Excel, I suppose. So yeah, Amber, over to Amber.
One thing is there is to remember is that you would be given bunch of data, but every data would be correlating with a certain part. For example, if there is a certain table given for part 1, then don't use that table for part 2. The answers which you would have calculated in part 1 shouldn't be used to interpret the data of part 2. The company would be same. For example, Chills Beverage, all the 3 parts would be based on that. But the questions of part 2, the data required for part 2 would be different than the data required for part 1. About the tools, as Shashwat already mentioned, Excel is the best tool to use. And I would also encourage you guys to show your data, present your data when you make the PPT, indulge as many graphs, indulge as many pie charts you could, because it would make it easier to read the PPT. And in part 2, Shashwat, if you could scroll down to some questions of part 2.
Yeah, sure.
There's
Which
one more thing. One more thing in scenario 2 here. Sometimes there will be misprints, and sometimes the things won't be clear, because in our case, like in 2021, some things were misprinted, like the dollar or the rupee sign. Also, the words were not so clear. Like there will be mistakes in the printing. Okay, so it's always better to refer to the Excel, that how the data has been presented in the Excel which will be shared by the ZS only. So if there is some error like that, you have to make your own judgment that what actually the question is asking for and how you should approach it. Scenario 2 has a lot of data, and it's very crucial for you to segregate it and figure out how you want to tackle it. Once you do that, the questions are actually a cakewalk. You'll be easily able to go through them.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
but I
what
think the question.
I was saying is that in the part 1, if you would look at the questions, you would be asked some specific questions, that who is the greatest sales manager, let's see, and what is the total revenue from this area of the city. So you would get the answers in numbers or name form, exactly specific answer. But in part 2, you would get both of these type of questions. You would get some questions in which you would be required to answer in data or a specific answer. But as you can see in the screen, it's the part 2, question number 2 I'm talking about. What quality checks would you perform on the data provided on part 1 to ensure that the data is accurate? So you see, no one has just a correct answer. If your answer could differ from me, and we both could be correct. So in part 2, there is a bit of qualitative approach we need to go for. So in your team of 5 or 3, you should, because we won't have time that each and everyone would be solving all the 3 parts. So when you distribute the parts between your team, try to distribute on the basis that the first part would be for someone who is very good at number crunching and DIs. The second part also requires number crunching and DIs, but you also need someone who has a qualitative approach, a great perspective, someone who can think out of the box. And then the part 3 is technical, so you could use someone who has a great technical knowledge in the part 3. This is how I think you should divide your team before approaching the case.
Yeah. Adding to what Amber said as well. So how would you eventually go on finding who is good at number crunching or who is good at the theory part or the SQL part? I'd suggest you'll be having, all of you will be having the older case studies. Shashwat also talked about it. So try solving those case studies sitting along with your team. Like there are still 4 to 5 days for the campus beats, and you might have done it previously as well. Try solving it with the entire team. This will help you get to the gist that who is good in which part of the case study, or who would be able to handle SQL, or who would be able to handle mathematics questions. That way it would be really easier for you on the D-Day, so that you would not be going for searching for people that, okay, you do this, and it would be very haphazard that way. So yeah, that would be the point I wanted to add.
I think we should take doubts if there are any, or else we should move on to the next section.
Yeah. Guys, if you have any doubts, please.
Yes, sir. I had a doubt. Am I audible?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, please say your name.
I'm Aditya Tiwari.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, as Ambassador said, that in case there are some specific data is given for part 1, we should try not using it for part 2. I had a doubt on that. In case we think that there is some necessity, like there is a lack of data for part 2, in that case, should we refer back to the data which is given for part 1 in the same scenario?
No, I don't think that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
No, you should not do it. Like it will be explicitly stated to you to not use that. And if you are feeling the data is not sufficient, maybe you are missing something. They will explicitly state you in the beginning of the question that don't use data from question 1 and question 2. Okay. We have solved previous year case studies as well, and we never encountered such scenarios. Like all the data is always sufficient for you to answer, as Arpita also said previously.
And to everyone, please feel free to ask your questions in whichever language you are good at. It can be Hindi also. There is no constraint on that.
Right.
We want maximum participation from your side. So there is a
Okay.
question from Utkarsh. Do we need to make a documentation of what we will do with the data and about the approach? Could you be more precise, because not able to get to your point? Please.
So I think he's asking about the Excel part, which someone mentioned that we should prepare the Excel on which we are working and then also attach in the PPT.
No, you don't have to attach the complete sheet. Yes, you will have to be concise about the PPT also, in which you present your answers. So I think Utkarsh needs to ask in a more precise way, because I'm
I
not able
think
to
I
understand
think
his.
Shashwat, he's asking that the PPT part, like how, like do we need to write the approach in the PPT as well, and how we need to document it in the PPT probably.
Yes, we'll be getting into that at the end of the PPT, this case study session.
एक्सक्यूज मी सर, आई वाज आस्किंग दैट कि क्या हम जैसे कि हम जो डेटा सेट हमें मिलेगा तो उस पे हम क्या चेंजेस करते रहे, उसका डॉक्यूमेंट उसको लिखते रहेंगे या फिर एक जगह नोट करते रहेंगे या
नहीं,
फिर उसकी कॉपी पे काम करेंगे?
that is only for your reference. You need to make those changes to the data set to derive an answer. The question that they have asked, you need to make changes and sort the data set in the Excel and make something out of the data to get a relevant answer. You don't need to document it in the final PPT. You have to convey your approach, but the complete process about what changes you are making to the Excel is not relevant here.
Basically, in the PPT, you have to just say that what answer did you reach in and how did you reach there. The how part is very important. So let's say I had written down my points that first we did this, then because of this we did this, because of this we did this, and then we reached the final answer. This should be clear in the PPT, that how you have got to the answer, not the exact step-by-step details of the answer, because you'll have to be concise about it, if that answers your question.
There is another question. Can you please tell as to how we should go about preparing SQL? What all concepts we should be strong at? I would like to take that question. For SQL, what we did last year with our team was that if you have a team of say 4 candidates, have at least 1 or 2 of them that are strong in certain aspects, like here SQL. So if any one of the candidate is strong in SQL, you can give that particular section to that candidate and then apply the concepts of that candidate to the answer in this particular question. So I don't think so that particularly as of now, if you don't know SQL, there is also no time, and I would prefer that you should not start SQL if you don't know anything. If you have a team of say 4 or 3 candidates, you should at least have someone that is used to solving questions in SQL, because there will be a section related to that. So yes, you need someone to have the knowledge about SQL.
So it was always good to have someone from CSE, IT, or maybe electronics branch who has done these things in the past as well. Still, if you don't have anyone, and see, it's gonna be there. Like business technology part will, if it at the end will have some SQL questions or maybe data flow questions. So for your sake, I'm just listing out some points which you might need to prepare for the SQL. First will be the schemas, the star schema and the snowflake schema. You should know about these because at the end you have to relate all the tables and make sure you should know that which table points out to what and what keys you should have for every table. The second thing will be joins and some basic functions of the SQL. You should know them. If you don't, then it's very difficult to solve the SQL part. I'm just telling you this because you asked which points you need to be aware about for SQL, but still it's always good to have a CSIT person in your team, or at least someone who has done projects on SQL or maybe is in data analytics.
The best case scenario for right now is that it is too late to learn SQL from the start.
Exactly.
So yes, you need to have the best case scenario is that you need to have someone who has prior knowledge.
maybe he is not in your team and you can still ask him, like that's
Yeah.
okay, no problem. Like it's informal session, we're just letting you know that maybe if you have some friend who's not taking part and is from CSIT, maybe you can ask him that please help me or something.
One thing I would like to also add is that if you guys don't have any prior knowledge to SQL, you don't need to get scared of about it. If you would look at the previous year case studies, SQL specifically was asked just in the last year's data set. Before that, in the third part, they were definitely, as Hardik already mentioned, there were star schemas and Power BI. So there was a technical part, but you don't need to focus explicitly on the SQL. You can just figure about technical part, and in the last part also the SQL with the choice, it was a choice given that you can either have a SQL query or either you could have a flow chart to show your answers. So if you don't have the technical knowledge currently, you don't have someone in your team, you don't need to be scared about it. If you get something like Power BIs and star schemas, which was there in previous years, these are something which you can Google them, and in the particular first day, you would have at least that much knowledge that you would be able to show your points that you are trying to convey. So you don't need to get scared about if you are not comfortable with the SQL, but definitely it would help if you had someone in the team or if you could contact to someone who has the knowledge about it.
True. Since this Hardik, would you like to answer this one?
I think Aditya Tiwari's questions, right? Non-tech and tech.
Yeah.
So as we have seen in previous years, Campus Week consisted of only one case challenge. That was your simple case study. Okay, however, this year they have bifurcated it into two parts, non-tech and tech challenge, namely as ZS case challenge and ZS tech case challenge. The tech case challenge, I feel, is also going to be a case study challenge. However, it will be very technology intensive. Like ZS has not disclosed any information about it, but we still feel that the tech challenge is going to be a case study challenge. However, it's going to be very technical intensive. Like it will hire for the role of BTA, the business technology associate, which requires some like coding or algorithms or data mining or big data or Hadoop, etc. So the non-tech tech challenge will have the differentiation that in the non-tech you will have consulting operation questions, maybe how you are tackling a business case study as you have seen in previous years. However, the tech challenge will be more about data mining and you're going to extract the data. Maybe it will use more knowledge of SQL or other software like Informatica or something. So we cannot be sure about what's going to come, what's going to happen in this because the first time they're doing it. I think that answers your query.
There is another question from Ankit. How to develop effective format of a performance report which can be handed out to the sales managers at the end of every month to communicate the performance. Okay, so how can we decide the key fields in this report? So this is a pretty common question in the case studies. So the simplest way to approach this question would be to first of all look at the case study and which and what business it is relating to. So first of all, let's take an example. I am taking an example of an automobile business, and say I am the sales manager and I need to provide a monthly report to my head. So what are the various factors I need to focus on? First of all, I can focus on number of units sold. There could be bikes, there could be cars. So we have to note down certain points and then present these points in either it can be bar chart or it can be pie chart. So we have to present it in a way that even a common man can easily relate to that data. The main gist and the main answer to this problem is that if you present a report, everyone should be able to read what has happened in the past month. So first step would be to make points regarding the report. Like I said, that first would be number of units sold. Second point could be the location, say number of units sold in Delhi, number of units sold in Mumbai. So like this, you will be getting multiple points and you need to present the data in data interpretation form and make it in a concise manner and you will get a good report. I hope you have understood, Ankit.
Just adding on to Shashwat's answer, like Ankit asked, how can we decide the key fields? So if you're talking about the last year's question, I could just tell you what key fields we use. So particularly, there would be two factors which you would be judging upon your sales managers. First would be the quantitative, as Shashwat already talked about, like the sales, the profit, the inquiries, etc. There would be also a qualitative part to the question, like how skillful the manager is, how knowledgeable, like how much knowledge does he have about the particular field which he is working upon. Also the personal character part, how do his colleagues rate him, how do his customers rate him in general. So yeah, that would also be the obviously the performance score which we talk about. That would also be a metric introduced in this particular report if you're talking about. Yeah.
And it would be made more clear as Shashwat is going to show his report from last year. So you'll be getting a great idea about how to approach these questions.
Probably I'll do it at the last one. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's move.
So let's move on. I think we have discussed more or less everything that is to be related to this case study. I think, Shashwat, you should now proceed on the process afterwards.
Okay. So I'll just talk about the two phases of the process which happen. So generally, when you get through the case study, and there are two particular selections which happen. The first part is the top 10 teams which are there in the case study, and the second is from team number 11 to the team number 150, the top 150 teams as we talk about it. So if you're the top 10 teams, you would be getting some more benefits obviously than the top 150, and I've enjoyed it. So yeah. So you would be required to present your solution to a particular jury. There would be like when the results would be declared after 2 or 3 days, there would be this meeting and you would be required to do that. And in that particular meeting, the top 3 teams would be announced and the prizes would be given. So this is the particular thing which is unique to the top 10 teams. The top 150 wouldn't get it. Now coming upon the placement part of the thing. So the top 10 teams would only be required to give 2 particular placement tests. That is one case study round and a human resource or the HR round would be there for the top 10 team students who are there. And the other teams from 11 to 150, they would be going through a proper grilling process, which would be consisting of 5 phases, which generally happens as the campus as well. It would consist of a aptitude test, a video proctored round, a smaller case study initially, the first part of it. And if we get through the first part, the second part would be the same as the top 10. The one would be a case study, which would be a bigger case study. It would be a case study interview in general, if I talk about it. And the second would be the HR part. So yeah, these are the 2 particular phases. So if anybody want to add anything.
Any doubts? I think we are good here because the process has been understood, I believe, by everyone.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think we should proceed to the next part. I think we are done with the basic knowledge of case study solving and also the process. So I think we should take more and more doubts as much as possible in the next few minutes.
And guys, no filter, right? No filter.
Please, you can ask in Hindi, you can ask in English, exactly. No issue. And please ask questions by mic now and don't type your questions because it would be more interactive in that manner.
Yeah, but it's not a constraint as well.
Hello, sir. Am I audible? Sir, I wanted to ask you that how we can draw this data flow diagrams. Like how should we start them? Like the approach to draw data flow diagram.
Data flow diagram.
Yes, sir.
You are suggesting in which section? You are suggesting in the BTA section, the technology section, or the business operations section?
Technology.
Yes, sir. Sir, from BT section. So it usually says either you can draw an SQL, you can provide an SQL query, or you can draw a data flow diagram. So let's say if we wanted to draw, yes, sir.
Do you have idea about star schema and various flowchart types?
Sir, I have seen them, but I won't say I have like a deep knowledge about it.
Sure. You have to get an idea about that before thinking about solving these questions.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you can see on the screen like this was a last year solution to the data flow diagram. In particular,
Yes.
my team did both the things. We solved with SQL as well as the data flow diagram. So the data flow diagram is generally kind of this diagram which I have drawn here. You'll get two particular tables. You'll have to identify the primary key out of the table, the foreign key out of the table, wherein you would relate and obviously draw a marketing report, or this is the marketing report because the question asked that, but you would be required to draw what the question asked in the center. So this is a star schema in general. You could also, as a Shashwat and Hardik has said, snowflake schema as well, or the constellation schema as well. You would be required to do anything. So it depends upon the question, but it would look more or less like this only. There would be various tables. You'd have to come up on a solution from those tables. So yeah.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Any more doubts?
The business technology part varies the most in every year's case study. In 2019, you will see there was no data flow, neither SQL. And on 2020, you will see there was SQL along with some dashboards, like you can make dashboards in Excel. And in 2021, there was no dashboard, there was just SQLs and data flow diagrams. So scenario 3 or the section 3 varies the most in every year. Maybe this year you can have all the SQL part, or maybe this year you won't have any SQL part, and maybe it's just dashboards. So you need to be prepared for the worst. So it's always good to have at least a knowledge of the data flow diagram so you can answer the questions of the scenario 3 or the section 3. As someone also asked that will SQL or data flow diagram will be there in the case study since the BT, the technology has also been introduced. Maybe yes, because the role offered by the ZS case challenge, the normal one, is DAA and BOA. And at the end of the day, both of these job profiles require some SQL knowledge. So you can, there is a chance that the scenario 3 or the section 3 of the case study will have some SQL or maybe data flow diagrams. Thus, tech challenge will be intensive of technology, like it will be technology intensive. However, the case challenge, the normal case challenge, is scenario 3 or section 3 can have SQL.
Right. And it's not restricted to SQL, right? Like in my solution, I use the Python as well. So if you know Python, you can do that as well. It's not necessarily SQL. Just adding. Yeah, any more doubts?
Yeah, and sir, regarding that dashboards, like what parameters should we select for creating the dashboards? Right, we cannot create dashboard for every data that is given to us, right? So what should we select while preparing the charts in that dashboard?
See, some key elements will be maybe regions, maybe segment, or maybe the employee IDs. You will have to figure out that on what basis you want to differentiate your dashboards. Like if you are an admin and you are looking at the dashboard, maybe you will need that I want the data from maybe just Delhi or maybe just the northern region of India. So one of the parameters will be that I want to segregate the data based on the regions. So you have to add that functionality in the dashboard. Maybe you want to differentiate or segregate data based on the quarters, maybe quarter 1, quarter 3, quarter 4. Okay, maybe you want to segregate data based on the product. So these checks or these parameters you have to determine once you are looking at the question, that what can be the factors I as an admin want to segregate the data upon.
Okay, sir.
Sir, I had a doubt regarding the previous year's case study which you are presenting. So in the scenario 3, it was asked in the part 1 first question that the 5 data tables were given and we had to create the 2 reports. Yes, sir. This was it. So it was asked that all the develop a data flow diagram or algorithm SQL to generate the 2 reports. So, sir, could you just give a brief idea of how can we create these 2 reports? Like the data which is given in these 2 reports are what we have to determine, or these are just sample data given to us in report 1 and report 2?
Okay, so I'll take this one. Sure. So the data which is given to you, first of all, is sample data. It doesn't has any reference to the calculations which you make. It's just the sample data which is given to you, and you have to create a report out of it. So the report, by the report, they obviously mean the SQL queries or the data flow diagram only, and getting up on the answer. So I'll just like show my answer to you as well. What we answered was you asked it specifically. So yeah. So as you see, the report which I created, it was perfectly from the SQL point of view. But how I would just go upon like the table which was given to me below, it was giving me a solution. So how I would reach upon that solution in particular with SQL, because obviously in that 6 rows I couldn't, like, that's not the real case scenario, right? There would be a lot of data, 40,000, 50,000 rows in general when we go to the real world. So you have to give just an SQL or a data flow diagram, and that would be a report in general. So this was my SQL, and this was my report for a data flow diagram. So yeah, I think that answers your question.
So means in the data from data table 1 to data table 5 were all the data which we have to use for calculation, means for interpretation, and for the report 1 and report 2, those data are just for sample.
Yeah, that's for sample. That doesn't need any calculations in particular. It would probably give you the case study would give you as well that it would be in sample. Probably I don't remember if they gave it last year or not, but they would write in particular. So,
okay, sir.
Any more doubts?
Yeah.
Please be quick.
Because if we don't have doubts, we would go on providing a solution to the last year's case study. I don't think anyone has.
Yes, we should proceed with last year's solutions.
Okay. So these are particularly my solutions in general, which I wrote, and I just presented to you that how to make a PPT in general as well, and how to present a solution. So obviously the basic structure of the PPT, ZS will give you in general, like they would tell you what, like these all things ZS already gave us. So we just had to do our answers to it. So as you can see, we use generally tables, and in PPT as well, I'd suggest you to write in points and tables only, because if you write in paragraphs, nobody is going to pay heed to it. But because paragraphs are too lengthy to read and it seems like a lot of data in front of your eyes, even I wouldn't read it eventually. So you see, like we use different colors, different color combinations, which are generally in the ZS as well, like orange and all those things. And we use basically for mathematics part, we use different parameters to judge it. So this is the business consulting part of it. You see how we just wrote it in points, and everybody who was in the top 150 in general wrote like this only. So the PPTs are more or less similar, who win each year. So I'd say write it in parts, write it in tables as much as possible. Try to concise your data so that it would be really easy for you. You see, we didn't copy the entire table from the question set. We only dealt with the data which was required. So don't write unnecessary data in the PPT, because obviously I think there's no limit to the PPT, but keep it to 10 or 11 at max. Don't exceed that in general. If it is, it's not bad, but obviously nobody would pay heed to 15 and 20 presentations in a PPT, slides in a PPT. So yeah, just try doing that. These will be some theory questions. Try to be as crisp as possible to those theory questions. Try to be as near to what the question is demanding in general as well to the theory one. And as I talked about, please refine your data in Excel and then particularly put it in the presentation. What I saw people do last year, people did a lot of rough calculations in the Excel sheet as well, and they then attach that particular worksheet as well. It looks very rude in general when a particular person or a particular judge is reading your case study. So please don't do that. You do a rough work, you do everything, but after when you are presenting it or giving it in the solution format, try to refine it as much as you can and keep it crisp maximum, so that it would not be very haphazard in general. So this was the consulting part. Moving on to so the operations part of the solution. So yeah, this was the operations part. So you see there were charts, like you have to make some assumptions to the case study when you'll be solving it. Okay, so sometimes it might be that there are two particular solutions to it which you are not able to judge out which would be correct and which would be wrong. And this, in our case, happened as well with the graph, because there wasn't specifically satisfied which graph we had to use. So we used both the graphs, we plotted them both and using a PPT, and probably our judge, whom we presented, he applauded as well, because we were able to judge both the solutions to these particular questions. Okay, so try, if you are assuming at some point and you're not getting the correct answer, you're not able to make a judgment out of it, please and please don't restrict yourself to only one thing. You could use two things, and it's not wrong in doing that. Okay, someone asked about the methodology. If you are using a confusing method, or like if you are using a new method in general to solve a particular solution, please mention that by mathematical part. Like, see what we did here, we explicitly mentioned how we use the line equation, how we use everything, and we gave the tabular answers to it as well. Please do that. So like, these are the theory questions. I won't go because they are very subjective. Someone asked me what were the factors to it. So yeah, these were the factors which we considered in last year's case study. You could take them from here as well if it comes a little bit similar, but try to dig in more factors which you would be accounting with that particular case study in general, with that particular scenario. It would be really good. Yeah, so these all are the theory questions. As I said, keep it to the point, keep it crisp. So yeah, that would be the operations part. The technology I've already shown you. I'll show it again. So what we did was, initially we wrote the approach. It's really important to mention your approach explicitly, because then only the person who is reading a case study or the solution to the case study would be able to understand what you have done in general. So please mention your approach either for the data flow diagram if you are drawing, or for the SQL as well. It would be really easy for the person sitting in front to basically understand what you have done. So yeah, as I said, we did both the things. We brought a data flow diagram as well, and we made the SQL as well. So you could also do both the things if time permits, but I'd say that if you're not comfortable with either of the two, please don't do the other thing. You will probably be taking more time. These are theory questions again. You could obviously attach Excel sheets to it, but obviously with the defined data. And yeah, one more thing, there were questions in our case study which were asked explicitly. Like, there was this question after each scenario, that 2 or 3 questions were there we had to answer. Don't put them in the PPT, because they aren't asking for those questions. Those questions would be asked to you when you will be uploading your answers on the portal. So don't put them in the case study. They're not required. That would increase your slides and nobody would read it. So yeah, that was my solution. If anybody wants it, I'll send them to you as well. Any doubts regarding it? Yeah.
I think that was a great explanation from your side, and it would be really helpful to all the teams. It has given them a glimpse on how to approach the case study.
Yeah.
So yes, I think that would be really useful. Now, if there are any questions, we would be happy to take them, or else we might be looking forward to end this session. So please, if you have any questions, you can ask.
Guys, feel free to ask any question. We already had a session from TPO, and the main motto of this session was to keep it unfiltered. You can ask any questions which you couldn't have asked in the presence of TPOs or Shubhkela sir. So feel free to ask any questions, and we have something else for you guys that will be launching soon if you don't have the question. So please go ahead and ask anything you want to.
I don't feel they have much questions about it.
I think the preparations have been done by them, and
yeah, exactly.
And I don't think we need to give them any more advice on that. So
okay, so let's go ahead and
all the best to everyone who will be appearing for the campus beats, and we all hope that you make it out and join us next year.
There's one question. There's one question last. May you please tell me about the best incentive plan? Priyanshu, can you please just explain what are you talking about?
Incentive plan.
I think it was from one of the questions of the case study which he's asking from. If you can just unmute your mic and tell us, we couldn't understand it.
I think she is relating to a particular question in last year's campus beats paper. And to answer that question, you need to look at the data provided. If you are able to get a feasible result out of the data, you will be easily able to recognize which is the best incentive plan. If you have previously solved that question and if you still have doubts, you can ask here. If you haven't solved yet, then there is no need to explain to you right now. You need to solve that first.
I think he was asking about the goal-based or the rank-based incentive plan, the third part, the second part, third question. So,
okay, please switch on your mic and ask the question in a more precise manner. I'm saying this to everyone. Priyanshu Kumar.
Okay, let's move ahead. I think. Amber, please.
Okay, so when we
so sometimes we have found that there is goal-based plan, and sometimes there is rank-based plan, and sometimes we are giving both rank plus goal-based plan. Then we are finding different results. Then, sir, how can we decide that which one is best? Whether we can go for goal plus rank-based plan, or double goal plus rank-based plan, or there is any other idea?
I think yes, there was a question regarding the incentive plan, and you can have many approaches to answer this question. Like in my experience last year, we tried to calculate a weighted rank. The number of like say there are two columns, rank and I'm not able to recall the question, but if there are two tables and you want to get an average rank, like say that there are two parameters and A, B, C, D are the four candidates, and A is first in one parameter and third in other parameter. So you can calculate a weighted rank based on that. So that was my approach last year to get a particular incentive plan based on the ranking. So if anyone else has a different opinion.
Yeah, I'll add to it. So yeah, the approach, I also use the same approach more or less, but I'd also suggest that please go on mentioning the pros and cons of each plan.
Yes.
Because it's kind of a question which doesn't have an exact answer to it, as I talked earlier about as well. So please go about what would be the pros and what would be the cons of each approach, and then make a particular answer to it, that how would you be justifying your answer to it, because it's about the justification which you give about that particular answer. So yeah, that would be all.
Yes, I think that is a valid answer.
Thank you, sir.
किसी और का कोई question है? Anyone else with any question, because we'll be ending soon and Amber will be taking over.
Amber, I think you should take over.
Yes. So that's it from the campus beats part, and we wish you all the best. And Amber, you can now continue.
Yeah, sure. So when we launched the Google form in your classes, and you would ask the question that where do you want to go, in coding or in core or in management? So many of you guys had filled the management, but we frankly had no idea when we were in third years that what were the places we could have gone. ZS Campus Beats is a company which comes for analysts. There are many other companies which come for analysts, but they also require some part of coding. And I guess many of you would be preparing for CAT. Can I have just a thumbs up in the chat window of those guys who are preparing for CAT? So I can see some hands up, and many of you would be preparing for CAT. But the thing is that there is a lack of financial literacy in our area, right? We don't know about investments. We don't know about basic financial stuff that should have been taught to us in our schools or in our colleges. And in our curriculum too, there is no area or no subject that teaches us about the financial part. In our college too, we don't have any club or neither a committee. So we are bringing to you a new club, which is a face from ECEL and NIT Raipur. And ECEL couldn't take the credit for this because it wasn't originally our idea. It was your juniors from second and first years who found that there is a need for a club which deals with business case studies, which deals with consulting, which deals with grabbing management queries and management jobs. So we will be launching soon. In fact, we are launching right now the Finance Club NIT Raipur, and it is in association with ECEL. We will be having our first event of FineAce 1.0. This is the QR code. You can grab the look at the numbers. And let me just go through about the D2C. We'll be having the event of D2C. It is a free registration on 25th March, 8 p.m. This isn't a flagship event. It's just an opening event for the financial club. And this is a quiz round. You can go ahead to give a glimpse about the financial club NIT Raipur, what it has already done. It has been we have an Instagram page. We post about some financial stuff, like for example, how does the Russia-Ukraine war is affecting India's GDP, and how do you want to start in the stock market or crypto market. So we will be bridging this gap of financial literacy that we have. When the juniors came to me with the idea that we want to make a group for all the people who want to go in consulting, who want to go in case study rounds in management, don't want to code or don't want to code, this is the stuff for that. And you can join this financial club if you have any doubts about the club, what this will do. You can ask this right here. And I think I have some people from the finance club, the founders of it. If you guys want to add something, please do. Why is there a need for finance club in a college, and what will it provide to our people? Anyone want to come up and speak something about it?
From second year metallurgy. So basically, my friends and I were very interested in finance and consulting domain, and we also had first year students who were very passionate, just like us. So we contacted Amber sir and ECEL, so they were very supportive in helping us. And as Amber sir said that it would be very beneficial for our college, and we also like you all to support us in this journey. And please do register for the quiz. We would be very helpful we would be very helpful. And yes, thank you so much.
See, basically the problem is that if I want to invest, if I want to start, I don't even have the ABCs of investing. How can I just go and invest my money? I don't even have a Demat account. Let's leave about Demat account. I don't even